One of the most powerful principles underlying creativity is the brain's ability to shift between two different cognitive states: focused attention and diffuse thinking. These two modes of brain activity serve very different purposes, yet both are essential for generating original ideas. Understanding how and when to use each state allows people to structure their creative work in a way that dramatically increases the likelihood of insight and innovation. Focused attention is the state most people associate with productivity. In this mode, the brain directs its resources toward a specific task or problem. Neural circuits in the prefrontal cortex become highly active, allowing a person to concentrate, analyze information, and work through details with precision. This state is extremely useful for tasks such as organizing ideas, editing work, solving logical problems, or refining a concept. When someone sits down with the intention to think deeply about a challenge, they are usually operating in this focused state. It allows the brain to filter out distractions and allocate cognitive resources toward the task at hand. However, intense focus has a limitation. While it is excellent for analysis and refinement, it is not always the best state for generating entirely new ideas. Creativity often requires the brain to make connections between pieces of information that do not seem obviously related. In a highly focused state, the brain tends to follow established pathways and familiar patterns of thinking. This is efficient for problem solving, but it can restrict the formation of novel associations. This is where diffuse thinking becomes essential. Diffuse thinking occurs when the brain relaxes its narrow focus and begins to operate in a broader, more associative mode. In this state, activity shifts away from strict task-oriented circuits and engages networks that allow ideas to wander and connect in unexpected ways. The brain begins exploring relationships between memories, concepts, and experiences that may not normally interact during focused attention. Diffuse thinking often happens during activities that require little deliberate concentration. Walking, taking a shower, exercising lightly, or simply stepping away from a problem can allow the brain to enter this mode. During these periods, the brain's default mode network becomes more active. This network is associated with reflection, imagination, and internal exploration. It is during this state that many people experience sudden insights or aha moments. The most effective creative process is not about choosing one mode over the other, but learning how to alternate between them deliberately. A person might spend time in focused attention gathering information, studying a problem, or actively trying to solve it. Then they step away and allow the brain to shift into diffuse thinking. During this period of mental relaxation, the brain continues working in the background, reorganizing information, and forming new connections. When the individual returns to focused attention after this break, they often find that new ideas or perspectives have emerged. This cycle, focus, release, and refocus, creates a powerful rhythm for creativity. Each state supports the other. Focus provides structure and depth, while diffuse thinking generates novelty and connection. Learning to intentionally alternate between these brain states can significantly improve creative output. Instead of forcing solutions through prolonged concentration, people can use periods of rest and mental wandering as an active part of the creative process. By respecting the brain's natural rhythms of focus and diffusion, creativity becomes less about waiting for inspiration and more about engaging the brain in the conditions where new ideas naturally arise. Over time, developing awareness of these two cognitive modes allows individuals to approach creative challenges more strategically. Rather than becoming frustrated when ideas do not immediately appear, they can shift states, step away from intense concentration, and allow the brain the space it needs to form new connections. This balanced approach turns creativity into a repeatable process rather than a random event, enabling deeper insights and more consistent innovation. A critical component of the creative process is the ability to tolerate uncertainty and remain engaged with ideas that are incomplete, unclear, or unresolved. From a neuroscience perspective, the brain is naturally designed to prefer certainty and predictability. Much of the brain's function revolves around creating predictions about the world and reducing errors between what it expects and what actually happens. When people attempt to create something new, they step into territory where predictions are weak and outcomes are unknown. This generates a feeling of discomfort because the brain interprets uncertainty as a potential threat. When someone begins working on a new idea, the early stages often feel messy and disorganized. Thoughts may not connect clearly, the direction may seem vague, and progress may appear slow. This is not a sign that creativity is failing. It is actually a normal stage in the brain's creative process. Novel thinking requires the brain to temporarily suspend its demand for clear answers and instead explore multiple possibilities at once. During this exploration phase, neural circuits are actively searching for patterns and connections among different pieces of information. The discomfort associated with uncertainty comes largely from activity in brain regions involved in error detection and cognitive control. These systems are constantly scanning for situations where outcomes cannot be predicted. When they detect ambiguity, they generate signals that feel like doubt, hesitation, or frustration. For many people, these sensations lead them to abandon the creative effort too early. They interpret the discomfort as evidence that the idea is not working or that they are not capable of solving the problem. Highly creative individuals tend to respond differently. Instead of avoiding the discomfort, they learn to remain present with it. Over time, their brains adapt to the experience of uncertainty and begin to treat it less like a threat and more like an invitation to explore. This ability is sometimes referred to as cognitive flexibility, the capacity to hold multiple possibilities in mind without rushing to resolve them immediately. When cognitive flexibility increases, the brain becomes more willing to experiment with unconventional ideas and solutions. One way to strengthen this ability is through deliberate exposure to open-ended thinking. Activities such as brainstorming, free writing, sketching, or generating multiple solutions to a single problem encourage the brain to operate without immediately judging the quality of the ideas. During these exercises, the goal is not to find the correct answer, but to expand the range of possibilities. This trains the brain to stay engaged even when outcomes are uncertain. Another useful approach involves separating idea generation from evaluation. The brain uses different neural networks for creative exploration and for critical analysis. When both processes occur simultaneously, the analytical system often suppresses emerging ideas before they have time to develop. By intentionally allowing a period where ideas are generated without judgment, individuals give the brain permission to explore freely. Evaluation can then occur later when the focused analytical networks are deliberately activated. It is also helpful to recognize that uncertainty often signals that the brain is approaching the edge of its existing knowledge. At this boundary, neural circuits must reorganize in order to integrate new information. This reorganization takes time, and during that time, the brain may produce feelings of confusion or temporary mental friction. Instead of resisting this phase, remaining engaged with the process allows deeper insights to emerge. Over time, repeated exposure to uncertain creative situations strengthens the brain's tolerance for ambiguity. What once felt uncomfortable gradually becomes familiar, and the mind becomes more willing to explore unconventional ideas without immediate resolution. As this tolerance grows, the creative process becomes less intimidating and more exploratory. By learning to remain engaged with uncertainty rather than escaping from it, individuals create the mental space required for genuine innovation. New ideas rarely appear fully formed. They evolve through experimentation, doubt, and gradual refinement. When the brain is allowed to stay in this open, exploratory state long enough, patterns begin to emerge, connections strengthen, and the original uncertainty slowly transforms into clarity and creative insight. Dopamine plays a central role in motivation, curiosity, and the drive to pursue creative work. In the brain, dopamine is not simply a pleasure chemical, as it is often described. Instead, it functions primarily as a signal related to anticipation, progress, and reward prediction. When the brain detects the possibility of a meaningful outcome, dopamine levels rise, increasing focus, energy, and the willingness to explore. In the context of creativity, this system becomes especially important because the creative process requires sustained effort, experimentation, and persistence over time. Creative work often involves long periods where the final result is uncertain. A person may spend hours developing an idea, refining a concept, or experimenting with different approaches without immediate visible progress. Without a properly regulated dopamine system, the brain may begin to lose motivation during these periods. This is why many people start creative projects with excitement but struggle to maintain momentum. The brain naturally seeks feedback and signals that effort is leading somewhere meaningful. One powerful way to maintain motivation during the creative process is to break large projects into smaller, manageable steps. Instead of focusing only on the distant goal, the brain benefits from recognizing small markers of progress along the way. Each time a small task is completed, writing a paragraph, sketching a concept, solving part of a problem, the brain registers that progress has occurred. This triggers a modest release of dopamine, reinforcing the behavior and encouraging continued engagement with the task. These small progress loops create what could be called a motivational chain. Rather than relying on one large reward at the end of a project, the brain receives a steady sequence of small reinforcement signals. Over time, this keeps motivation stable and reduces the likelihood of burnout or frustration. In practical terms, creative professionals often structure their work into sessions with clear objectives. Instead of trying to produce a finished masterpiece in a single effort, they focus on completing one meaningful step at a time. Curiosity also strongly interacts with dopamine regulation. When the brain encounters something intriguing or slightly mysterious, dopamine levels increase, encouraging exploration. This is why creative thinking often flourishes when people are exposed to new ideas, unfamiliar environments, or novel challenges. Curiosity signals to the brain that there may be valuable information to discover, which energizes the learning and creative circuits. However, the dopamine system must remain balanced. Excessive stimulation from constant digital entertainment, rapid rewards, or multitasking can disrupt the brain's sensitivity to progress signals. When the brain becomes accustomed to frequent, high-intensity rewards, slower creative processes may begin to feel less engaging. Maintaining periods of focused work without excessive distraction helps preserve the brain's natural responsiveness to small achievements. Another useful strategy involves building rituals that mark the start and end of creative work. These routines help the brain associate certain behaviors or environments with progress and reward. For example, sitting in a specific workspace, using particular tools, or beginning work at a consistent time each day gradually conditions the brain to anticipate meaningful activity. This anticipation itself can trigger dopamine release, making it easier to initiate creative work even before results appear. Importantly, dopamine responds not only to outcomes, but also to the expectation of progress. When a person believes their effort is moving them forward, motivation remains strong even if the final goal is still far away. This mindset shifts attention toward the process rather than only the result. Instead of waiting for a finished product to feel rewarded, the brain begins to value the act of creating itself. Over time, this approach builds a stable internal motivation system. The creative process becomes fueled by curiosity, incremental progress, and repeated engagement rather than occasional bursts of inspiration. By structuring work in ways that support healthy dopamine signaling, individuals can maintain the energy and persistence required to develop ideas full. The environment in which creative work takes place has a powerful influence on the brain's ability to generate ideas and enter productive mental states. The brain is highly sensitive to contextual cues, meaning that specific surroundings, routines, and sensory signals can gradually train neural circuits to activate certain patterns of thinking. Over time, consistent environmental signals can act as triggers that prepare the brain for creative activity, making it easier to begin work and sustain deep engagement with ideas. One of the most effective ways to harness this principle is through the creation of a dedicated creative environment. When a particular space is consistently used for creative work, whether it is a desk, a room, or even a specific corner, the brain begins to associate that location with the mental processes required for idea generation. This association is built through repetition. Each time the individual enters that environment and engages in creative thinking, neural pathways linking the space and the activity become stronger. Eventually, simply entering the space can prime the brain to transition into a more focused and imaginative state. This process relies on the brain's natural capacity for associative learning. Just as certain environments can trigger relaxation or alertness, they can also trigger creativity. Many people notice that they struggle to concentrate in spaces filled with distractions or unrelated activities. When the brain receives too many competing signals, attention becomes fragmented and creative thinking becomes more difficult. By reducing unnecessary stimuli and designing an environment that supports focus, the brain can allocate more cognitive resources toward generating and refining ideas. Rituals and routines also play an important role in activating creative states. Repeating a specific sequence of actions before beginning work can signal to the brain that it is time to transition into a different mode of thinking. This might involve simple behaviors such as preparing a drink, reviewing notes, listening to a particular type of music, or organizing tools before starting. These rituals function as psychological cues that gradually condition the brain to anticipate creative activity. Over time, the brain begins to respond to these cues automatically. The moment the routine begins, neural circuits associated with focus, imagination, and idea generation become more active. This reduces the mental resistance that often appears when starting a challenging creative task. Instead of waiting for motivation to appear, the routine itself initiates the process. Lighting, sound, and sensory input also influence creativity. Natural light can support alertness and cognitive clarity, while moderate background noise may encourage associative thinking. Some individuals find that quiet environments promote deep focus, while others benefit from gentle ambient sounds that prevent the mind from becoming overly rigid. The key is identifying sensory conditions that allow the brain to remain alert without becoming overstimulated. Another important factor is minimizing digital interruptions. Frequent notifications, messages, or sudden shifts in attention disrupt the neural networks responsible for deep thinking. Creative work often requires sustained cognitive engagement, where the brain gradually builds complex connections between ideas. Interruptions force the brain to repeatedly reset its attention, making it harder to reach the deeper stages of the creative process. The physical arrangement of tools and materials can also influence creative flow. When essential tools are easily accessible and organized, the brain experiences fewer barriers to action. This allows ideas to move more smoothly from thought to expression. Whether writing, designing, drawing, or building, having a structured workspace reduces friction and encourages experimentation. Importantly, the environment should feel inviting rather than restrictive. While structure is helpful, creativity also benefits from a sense of openness and curiosity. Elements such as visual inspiration, reference materials, or creative artifacts can stimulate the brain's associative networks and encourage new perspectives. By intentionally shaping the environment and establishing reliable creative triggers, individuals can train their brains to enter productive states more easily. Instead of relying on unpredictable bursts of inspiration, the surroundings themselves begin to support the creative process. When environmental cues, routines, and sensory conditions are aligned with creative work, the brain gradually learns to shift into imaginative and focused thinking with less effort. Over time, this structured environment becomes a powerful ally in the creative process, helping transform creativity from a sporadic experience into a consistent and repeatable practice. Why and bring creative projects to completion. Movement and physical activity have a profound influence on the brain's ability to generate creative ideas. While creativity is often imagined as a purely mental activity that happens while sitting still and concentrating, neuroscience suggests that the body and brain work together closely during creative thinking. When the body moves, it triggers a series of physiological changes that support brain function, increase mental flexibility, and encourage the formation of new associations between ideas. These effects make movement a powerful tool for stimulating the creative process. One of the most immediate effects of physical activity is increased blood flow to the brain. As the heart rate rises during movement, more oxygen and nutrients are delivered to neural tissue. This improved circulation supports the metabolic demands of neurons and helps maintain alertness and cognitive performance. Even relatively light activity, such as walking, can produce measurable improvements in mental clarity and idea generation. Movement also influences the release of neuromodulators that affect mood, motivation, and cognitive flexibility. Physical activity stimulates the production of chemicals that support neural communication and plasticity, allowing the brain to form and reorganize connections more effectively. When these systems are activated, the brain becomes more capable of exploring new possibilities and generating unconventional solutions. Walking in particular appears to be closely connected with creative thinking. When a person walks at a relaxed pace, the brain shifts away from intense analytical focus and begins to operate in a more associative mode. This state resembles the diffuse thinking mode that supports idea generation. As the body moves rhythmically, the mind becomes less constrained by rigid patterns of thought. Ideas that previously seemed unrelated may begin to connect, leading to novel insights. This effect is amplified when walking takes place in environments that provide gentle sensory stimulation, such as parks or quiet outdoor spaces. Natural environments provide visual complexity without overwhelming the brain with excessive demands for attention. The brain can therefore relax its control systems and allow more spontaneous patterns of thought to emerge. Many people notice that solutions to problems appear unexpectedly during walks, even when they are not consciously trying to solve them. Movement also interrupts mental stagnation. When someone spends long periods sitting and attempting to force a solution, the brain can become locked into repetitive thought patterns. This phenomenon sometimes leads to mental fatigue or the feeling of being stuck. Physical activity disrupts these loops by changing physiological states and shifting neural activity patterns. After even a short period of movement, the brain may return to a problem with renewed perspective. Another advantage of incorporating movement into the creative process is the regulation of stress. Moderate physical activity helps reduce excessive stress signals in the brain while maintaining an optimal level of alertness. When stress levels are too high, the brain narrows its focus and prioritizes predictable solutions rather than exploring novel ones. By lowering excessive stress while preserving energy and engagement, movement creates conditions that support flexible thinking. Movement can also be strategically used between periods of focused work. A person might spend time concentrating deeply on a creative task, then take a short walk or engage in light physical activity. During this break, the brain transitions into a more diffuse mode of thinking, allowing subconscious processing to continue. When the individual returns to the task, new ideas or perspectives may have emerged during the movement period. Importantly, the type of movement does not need to be intense. Simple activities such as stretching, walking, or light exercise are often sufficient to stimulate the cognitive benefits associated with creativity. The goal is not physical exhaustion, but gentle activation of the body and brain. By integrating movement into daily routines, individuals create natural opportunities for the brain to shift between focused and associative modes of thinking. These shifts help break rigid patterns, encourage exploration, and support the development of fresh ideas. Over time, treating movement as a regular part of the creative process can significantly enhance the brain's ability to generate insights and solve problems. The combination of physical activity and mental exploration allows creativity to emerge more naturally, reinforcing the deep connection between the body's motion and the mind's capacity for innovation. Sleep plays a fundamental role in the creative process because it allows the brain to reorganize information, strengthen neural connections, and integrate experiences in ways that are not possible during waking hours. Although creativity is often associated with active thinking and conscious effort, many of the most important processes that support creative insight occur when the brain is offline. During sleep, the brain continues working on problems and ideas in the background, connecting pieces of information that may have seemed unrelated during the day. One of the key functions of sleep is memory consolidation. Throughout the day, the brain absorbs enormous amounts of information from experiences, conversations, reading, and problem-solving attempts. This information is initially stored in temporary neural patterns. During sleep, particularly in deep sleep stages, the brain begins to stabilize and reorganize these memories. Important information is strengthened while less relevant signals are reduced. This process allows the brain to build stronger networks of knowledge that can later be used for creative thinking. Rapid eye movement, REM sleep, is especially important for creativity. During REM sleep, the brain becomes highly active and begins linking distant memories and concepts together. Neural circuits communicate more freely across different regions of the brain, allowing unusual or unexpected associations to form. This state is less constrained by logical filtering, which means ideas can combine in novel ways. Many creative insights are believed to originate from this type of neural activity. Because of these processes, it is common for people to experience creative breakthroughs after sleeping on a problem. A concept that felt confusing or unsolvable during the day may suddenly appear clearer in the morning. This happens because the brain has spent the night reorganizing the information, exploring possible connections, and strengthening patterns that support understanding. In some cases, individuals even report dreaming about problems they were working on and waking up with new ideas or solutions. Sleep also restores the brain's capacity for flexible thinking. When a person is sleep-deprived, activity in the prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for complex reasoning and cognitive control, becomes less efficient. At the same time, emotional regulation and attention begin to decline. This combination can make it much harder to sustain creative work or generate new ideas. Fatigue often causes the brain to rely on familiar habits and predictable patterns rather than exploring novel possibilities. Adequate sleep improves both idea generation and idea evaluation. During creative work, the brain must alternate between exploring possibilities and selecting the most effective solutions. Sleep supports both sides of this process. By strengthening neural networks overnight, it increases the pool of ideas available the next day while also improving clarity and judgment when refining those ideas. Another important factor is timing. Many people notice that their creative thinking is strongest during certain times of the day. This pattern is influenced by the body's circadian rhythms, which regulate alertness, energy levels, and cognitive performance. When sleep schedules are consistent, these rhythms become stable, allowing the brain to reach peak mental performance at predictable times. This stability supports more reliable creative output. Short periods of rest during the day can also support creativity. Brief naps or moments of quiet relaxation allow the brain to shift away from intense focus and begin integrating information subconsciously. Even a short break can reset attention and create space for new ideas to emerge. Importantly, sleep should not be viewed as lost time in the creative process. Instead, it acts as an essential phase where the brain continues processing ideas and preparing for deeper insights. Many creative professionals intentionally stop working on a challenging problem before going to sleep, allowing the brain to continue exploring solutions overnight. By prioritizing consistent and high-quality sleep, individuals give their brains the opportunity to reorganize knowledge, strengthen connections, and generate new perspectives. Over time, this nightly process becomes a powerful partner in creativity, allowing ideas to mature and evolve beyond what conscious effort alone can achieve. When sleep is treated as an active part of the creative process rather than a break from it, the brain gains the time and conditions it needs to reorganize information and form new connections. By consistently allowing the mind to rest, integrate experiences, and reset cognitive resources, individuals create a powerful cycle of effort and recovery that strengthens creative thinking. Over time, this rhythm of focused work followed by restorative sleep enables ideas to develop more fully, leading to deeper insights, clearer solutions, and a more sustainable creative process.